Hey everyone, Joshua Gibson here with episode 69 of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. Before we get started, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the show's sponsors, BarShield and First Attempt Lifting. BarShield created a maintenance kit designed to prevent rust and restore spin to a barbell sleeves. My discount code, PWPodcast, gets you 10% off of your entire purchase, and it will also help me to continue producing great podcasts. Head over to barshieldUSA.com, pick up a kit, and get your bars looking and spinning like new. I've also recently partnered with Matt Bergeron of First Attempt Lifting to get you guys 10% off of any diet or digital coaching service. Matt's approach mirrors mine in that it focuses on principles instead of methods. Don't believe me? Go check it out at firstattemptlifting.com and help support the show and support your own goals. Use the code PWPodcast_diet for any nutrition service or PWPodcast_lift for any online programming option. That's it for the long-winded intro. Let's get on to this week's podcast with Taylor Mendes. Welcome, everyone, to episode 69 of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. And I was really hesitant to say the episode number for some very immature reason on my end. But today I'm joined by Taylor Mendes, who was on a previous episode, 39, I believe. So if you'd like to know more about her background, training experiences, competing experiences, you can go back to that and listen to it. And if not, if you just are really have your heart set on listening to this episode, Taylor, could you maybe give us a brief background to kind of update everyone who's new to the podcast?
Hey guys, I am a 64 kilo weightlifter, and I've been lifting for about 5 years. Currently live in Austin, Texas, and I train in my gym, or in my garage.
Okay. I'm sure you kind of like that kilo increase from 63 to 64.
It is kind of whatever.
Yeah. Do you normally walk around heavier, like 65 or?
I mean, I can get big, but
yeah.
if I'm eating like a sensible person, I'm like 64, and I can get small very much easier than I can get bigger. I was hoping for like a 62, 61.
Yeah.
Maybe get some girls out of the class, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that because you work with Working Against Gravity as like a nutrition coach for weightlifters and athletes. So how much of a stickler are you when it comes to your nutrition?
For a while, I was super, super strict. Most of the time going into a meet, I'm pretty strict. I'm just kind of like lucky, I think, in terms of metabolism and the way that my body works, that it's very easy for me to lose weight, gain weight or whatever. So I don't have to be, I don't have to hit my macros 7 days a week for 3 months to make weight. But going into a meet, I'm like, I'd say 80% of my meals are tracked pretty diligently. And I don't drink any alcohol leading into a meet. But if I'm, right now I don't have a meet on the horizon, so I'm just kind of like eating intuitively. I check my weight every few days and make sure I don't want to be higher than 65 just because I don't like being that big, and I think I just kind of look not great. So I was 64 too this morning.
Oh, wow.
And that's eating whatever.
So do you have, and I guess this is kind of out of curiosity and then also gives us some insight into your approach when you're working with other weightlifters that are competing. Do you have like general recommendations that you make as far as what someone's weight should look like leading up to a meet? Do you have like a guideline as to how much weight is usually normal to lose and what's like too much or too little?
So it really depends on the athlete, and it depends on what you're going for. I think that if you are someone who could be on the world team, then you can go to much more extreme lengths to cut weight and, be much more strict with your diet. If you're someone who's like competing on the local level, maybe like trying to qualify for nationals, I think like being super aggressive in your weight cut is not a great idea. So it does depend. Generally, like very, very generally, because it depends on like male, female, size of the athlete. If you're a 45 kilo chick, like I don't want you to ever weigh anything over like 48. I'm going to start panicking because when you think about the percent of weight, that it's just too much. Like you're going to feel different going from 48 to 45 than if like you're, what's the new 109 male and you weigh 112. Like it's just different. So, yeah, I would say for like a mid-level weight class, I don't want anyone to be over like 3 kilos over their weight class. The week of, if in a perfect world, I'd rather not cut more than like 1.5 kilos for anybody. I think it's just stressful in the mind and the body. And like, I always tell athletes, like it shouldn't be harder to make weight than it is to make lifts on the platform. Yeah. So, anyone I'm working with, like we have that conversation. I'm like, all right, what are you thinking about when you go into a meet? If you're just concerned about making weight, we've got an issue. Like, cause you shouldn't be thinking about that. You should have a system down. It shouldn't be that hard for you to make weight, and you should be concerned about your lifts. It's hard for me to give I wish I could like tell you like, this is the percentage that I prescribe to. I mean, it depends on if you're super lean, it's going to be harder to cut weight, and you're not going to want to let yourself get heavier, like too much over your weight class. If you are kind of fat, like quote unquote, using that like very loosely as far as body fat percentage, then you can be a little heavier because it's going to be easier for you to cut weight. If you're someone who can manipulate fluid super easily, you can be a little heavier. I find women get better results with like fluid manipulation than men do. So like a lot of factors go into play. You just want to know your body and what you respond to. And if you're like super new to weightlifting, I think it's totally worth it experimenting with those things and seeing how dramatically your body might respond. Like I've seen some women lose like 3 or 4 kilos with fluid manipulation. And if you know that about yourself, you're like, oh, well, I can train a little bit heavier than I realized, but obviously within reason, because there is a loss to, anytime you're losing weight, fluid, or actually cutting fat.
Yeah, I almost think that's a more insightful answer, because you didn't give any general recommendations. Because obviously, if you can give a blanket recommendation, you're not considering the spectrum that every athlete operates on in terms of, like you said, body composition, size, training age, just age in general. And I think it's kind of funny. I don't know if you see this because you work with a lot of weightlifters, but typically newer athletes have this weird desire to cut weight for meets. And I don't know if it's because it's like part of the process and they feel like more of a weightlifter or an athlete when they do that. And then so someone that does want to compete in their first meet, or even just a local meet in general, what's your advice on cutting weight?
Don't. I mean, unless you're like actually unhealthy and you know that you need to lose weight for just general health, why would you put that stress on yourself? Like I see minimal value in that. I mean, once you get to the point where you're like trying to qualify for nationals and maybe you need to like cut a little bit to make it, then maybe, but like trying to go down like 4 weight classes because you feel like you'd be more competitive, like you're deluded. It's so much stress. The havoc it's going to wreak on your body. It's just, it's not sustainable. I deal with this often, and this is something I talk about a lot with the people that I've worked with, and then also just with our coaches, is that this is not the sport of being as small as you can be. It's the sport of being as strong as you can be. And people don't like that answer. People think it's like easier to be smaller than it is to be stronger. And I guess you can look at it that way.
Yeah, and when you realize that, and again, it's something like you just said, it kind of falls on deaf ears when you realize that it takes years and years and years to be really good at weightlifting and kind of reach your potential. Why would you want to sacrifice a year going down a weight class and then minimizing the amount of muscle you can put on for even a high-level athlete, someone right on the cusp of maybe medaling if they're newer to the sport? You should just in my opinion, stay in a higher weight class and put on more muscle mass and just try and prepare for the 3 to 5 years coming, where you're really looking to make a run at an international team or something like that. Now, out of curiosity, do you have any other, I don't want to say issues, but common kind of common themes that you run into with people that are newer to manipulating their weight and tracking their nutrition, and kind of something you always have to have a talk about as far as educating the person?
I think I've noticed as of late, I've gotten some pushback on people wanting to, I think it's super common to not eat the day of weigh-ins. Almost all the athletes I know, except for like very few people, are lucky enough that they get to like get up and have a normal day on the day of a meet. And a lot of the people that I've been working with lately, there's like some like, well, that doesn't sound like a good idea. I'm like, well, you can kind of get away with it, and it's pretty normal. And kind of along that same vein is it's not normal to walk around underweight. It's not. That should never be your goal to like wake up every day at 63.9. Like I'm using my weight class for an example. Like you should train a little bit heavier, and you should be comfortable with that, and be comfortable the week of a meet being about a kilo over and like slowly cutting down. And when you really think about it, you only need to weigh 63.9, or you won't like for 5 seconds. Like you don't need to wake up underweight. You don't need to go to sleep underweight. And it's good to get comfortable with that, because you want to be as big as you can be when you weigh in. Like now the weighing in lighter has zero advantage to you. So why would you do it? And people get very uncomfortable. They seem to think that something like miraculous is going to happen to their body, and they're going to wake up 3 kilos overweight. It's like, it's not going to happen. Like this hasn't happened for months, because you should be tracking your weight daily as a weight class athlete, and you should know you can like play it super close. And I think that's pro level. When you weigh in at like 63.9 or 54.9, that's like pro status, and that's a good thing, and you should be comfortable with that.
Yeah, I never really thought of it like that. That's a really interesting way to say it. Is like you literally only have to be that weight for that fraction of a second that you're on the scale. Mm-hmm. No other time matters. And it's funny because I've ran into this with a couple other lifters where they'll be like, oh, I'm a half kilo under, but the next day they're like 0.2 kilos under. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but you're not going to gain weight the morning of. So you don't have to worry about suddenly coming up to like a kilo over the weight class. Like, I don't think the body works like that. Now, as far as dropping the weight goes, a lot of people are familiar with water loading or kind of cutting out carbs. I have a way that I like to approach it. The day before, usually we'll stop eating a little bit earlier in the day, maybe like 5 p.m. We'll kind of cut carbs, raise the fat a little bit, kind of cut liquid at a certain point, but not try and limit it throughout the day. As far as your approach, do you tend to go for the fluid manipulation, or is it kind of similar to what I just explained?
It does depend on the person. And for me, I'll just talk about what I do personally. I have not done a water load in a while. I'd say like a year and a half or so. I do like those. I just haven't needed to do them. For me, most of the time, I'm like super consistent with my macros, because I track macros for about 2 months. So I know exactly where my weight is, and I can just systematically, if I need to cut carbs, I do that. I watch my sodium, and that's it. Like I will, just for peace of mind, I do tend to stop eating earlier in the day, like you said, and I don't drink a ton of water that day, just because psychologically, I do like to try to eat the day before. And lately I've been competing at like 5 or 6 p.m. And it's just like a super long day if you don't get to eat and you're just like sitting in your hotel room. So I try to play it like that, but, and I prioritize, like you said, fats, because those are going to leave you a little more satiated than if you had carbs. And I prioritize, higher volume food that's lighter, or lower volume food that's more calorie dense. So this would be things like peanut butter or pasta, rather than eating like a bunch of vegetables that are going to be very heavy, like physically heavy in your stomach for the same calories. Because like you're not getting fatter, like you said, in 24 hours. So you're just trying to focus on feeling full and getting calories in. And then I prioritize water, because I have been too dehydrated in the past for meets. And there is literally nothing worse than realizing that you are like a creaky, dehydrated mess when you're warming up. So I always tell people that you need to be drinking water, if nothing else. Like water first, food later. Because you can in 2 hours, you can eat enough to feel fine, but you might not be able to rehydrate if you're too dehydrated.
Okay, and I think that's really useful for people to know. And then after the weigh-in, what's your approach as an athlete to kind of refueling and getting ready to compete? Because obviously you don't want to eat so much to the point where you're uncomfortable and your belt it kind of presses against your stomach, but you also don't want to avoid food. So maybe what does a meal look like, or the fluids in the meal right before your session?
I drink pretty much as much water as I can. Sometimes, like, I've had Gatorade and stuff in the past, but that's not part of my normal diet. So I haven't done that the last few years. If you have Gatorade normally or something like that with electrolytes, I recommend it because you're used to it. You know, you'll feel fine. I have coffee because I always drink coffee. And then I have a bland carb, like a bagel, oatmeal, pasta, rice. And that's about it. Like if I can eat a little bit more, I might like pick at something sweet. But most of the time I don't, just because like with the nerves and everything, like my stomach just doesn't feel great. I know people like to go hard after they weigh in, and I think it's really stupid, like to eat just shit, because like you probably don't eat that before you train most days and acting like it's not over yet. You just weighed in, like you're not done, so it's not time to celebrate. So when people do, like I advise against that strongly. You need to eat whatever you normally eat before you train, like your heavy Friday or heavy Saturday, whatever that meal is. Your post weigh-in meal should look like that, probably with a little more water.
Yeah, that's funny. Someone comes to mind. This guy will get like fudge-covered Twinkies and Sour Patch Kids, and it's just like, and I'm like, dude, you literally just like dieted for like a week to cut this weight or water loaded or whatever you did. Like, there's no reason to eat this. I mean, besides I think it's kind of the idea of celebrating the making weight, which is like part of the routine, but. Yeah. And then kind of, since I have you on and we can chat about nutrition, maybe we can talk a little bit about supplementation before and then during the meet. As far as caffeine goes, do you have any recommendations for, I guess we would kind of say training and then the week of the meet and then at the meet? Is it just kind of routine? Do you have people like cut caffeine out? Do you ever discuss this with people?
I mean, I do not cut caffeine out because I don't feel well. I never recommend that to someone if they're a regular coffee drinker. I think you're going to just feel like shit. Like that's going to mentally cost you so much. If you're not a regular coffee drinker and you don't need it, I think it's a good idea to cut it out the week of. But for me, rather than like cutting out my coffee or something like that, I occasionally use JavaStem, which is a caffeine supplement. It's JAVASTIM from Poliquin. And those are, for me, they're like the best vehicle for caffeine and training, just because like I don't have to drink something. They don't make me feel like jittery or like make my head feel foggy. They just like make me feel like a very good kind of energized. And I recommend that to anyone. And you can have, I've had as many as 2. 3 would probably like you'd lose your mind, but I think they're great. And so I only use those occasionally in training though, because I don't want to get numb to them, that they don't have an effect anymore. So I use them very irregularly in training, and I only use them for the clean and jerk in competition because I find it's too much in the snatch. Like you're already nervous, you're already kind of like, nah. You don't need something more to stimulate you. You're already kind of overstimulated. Yeah,
and I guess that's important for you and other athletes that are kind of closer to that international level where taking supplements that contain caffeine and possibly other ingredients that are banned would be a very bad idea. So limiting it to something like a JavaStem that I've never seen the product. I don't know what's in it, but I'm sure it's just very, very basic.
Yeah, I mean, I've been tested on it after having taken it multiple times. So unless there's some issue that I'm not aware of, everything I have is clean. But yeah, like that's a good point. Whatever you take, you do need to double check it. And I think there is the misconception that just because I bought it on Amazon or I bought it at the grocery store, it's clean and I can take it and not be banned. But that is patently false. Yeah. So be very, very careful. Even cold medicine, you can't take some cold medicines before you compete. So be mindful of that for sure.
Okay, and kind of before we move on, I know we didn't really plan on discussing nutrition, but do you have any other considerations for athletes that are getting ready for a competition, either before or kind of like the return to training afterwards?
Just, I mean, week of competition should be business as usual as far as your food goes and your supplementation goes. It's not the time to experiment. It's not the time to like try something new and see how it goes. I think people think that like, oh, I'll try this new pre-workout here at the meet, thinking that that's going to have a dramatic effect, and it might, but dramatic doesn't mean positive. So you want to feel how you always feel, during your regular training sessions, and then post-meet, like you don't need to go hard. Like I think that's that's the thing that really I see as a dangerous cycle with almost every weightlifter I work with is like after they compete, they feel like they need to drink and eat everything they can get their hands on. And like the weight fluctuations I've seen with athletes of all levels after a meet are just ridiculous, and it's unhealthy. And if your diet is that restrictive that you feel like you need to lose your mind after every meet, like maybe you need to reevaluate your diet or your weight class because something is not working for you. I mean, I don't see like multi-kilo fluctuations in my body weight after a meet. And I mean, maybe if you're cutting hard because you're like a very elite level weightlifter, maybe it makes sense, but probably for 99.9% of athletes, that's just disordered. Like it should be happening.
Yeah, I agree completely. And then as far as like when you're kind of in the off season, like between major competitions, how strict are you as far as just tracking your nutrition? And then to someone that wants to, obviously maintain a consistent body weight, what sort of recommendation do you have?
I think I'm obviously terribly partial to macro tracking. I track my macros very consistently for like 2 to 3 years, almost seven days a week, 365. And that taught me a lot about what was in my food, like what my body responded well to. At this stage, when I'm kind of in the off season, I eat much more intuitively. But I still prioritize like eating whole foods, eating, more moderate fat, high protein, like lots of vegetables, just like eating like a sensible adult should eat. But I still I have alcohol a couple days a week, and I have sweet things if I want sweet things, but you don't need to go hard. But that's been a journey. That's been a 5-year journey of like figuring out how to do that. And so I kind of think that that's what it takes, because I've seen people go through kind of the same transformation of like having to track diligently, or else they like can't maintain a reasonable weight or make good decisions for themselves, and then kind of getting over that and learning about their body and seeing the value in eating like a decent person and just being able to do that intuitively. And I think this also depends on like if you're someone who's been heavier in the past, your body's going to be probably less forgiving and you need to be more precise. I see that with my husband. He used to be 300 pounds and now he's 240, but he can easily, like his weight can easily start rising if he just is a little looser with things. So it depends on the person as well.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, it's all about going through it so that you can understand it at a bit of a deeper level in terms of how much protein is in something, how much fat, fiber, what kind of nutrients you need, what you've had throughout the day. Like it sounds like very complicated, but you kind of have like this tracker in your head as you're eating, and you can kind of realize like I haven't had enough fruits or vegetables or whole grains or whatever it is. And then in regards to like if someone listening doesn't want to track, but they want maybe like a template, I would just say eat more lean protein than not, eat more fruits and vegetables than not. And then usually that will clear up the rest, right? Because protein is very satiating. More protein isn't going to be bad. More fruits and vegetables won't be bad. But you can easily go overboard with fats, which are pretty much in everything. If you eat enough meat, you're going to get plenty of fat, reasonably speaking. Now,
yeah, and I wanted to add to that, like health food is not like an RX bar, Quest bars, and protein powder. Yeah. I hear that, but they're like, "Oh, I ate so healthy," and I like look at like I can see my clients' logs in my fitness pal. I'm like, you ate multiple Quest bars and orange bars and protein powder. You didn't have any real food. Like those are meal replacement options that you can have, but not often. Like I cannot remember the last time I had protein powder or a Quest bar or anything like that. So that is not health food. Health food is real food.
Yeah, my whole thing about the Quest bar is it has so much fiber for such a small piece of food that it just always makes me uncomfortable after eating it. So I think like trying to distribute that evenly throughout the day is a much better approach. But kind of transitioning now that we've spent so much time talking about nutrition to your training, we obviously had a topic in mind. You've kind of been dealing with an injury that's been limiting what you can do, and I've kind of discussed this, and I've gotten questions about injuries, how to train around them, how to return from them. It's a topic people are always eager to hear about because it is so common. I don't think there's any athlete ever anywhere that has not suffered some sort of injury that they've had to manipulate their training around, be it something that's just like an overuse injury, something acute, something chronic. So the reality of it is, I guess, everyone gets injured. And that's not to say it's severe, it keeps them from training, but it should be considered. So I'd like you to kind of discuss what precipitated it, how it happened, and what you've been doing with your training, what's frustrating about it, and how you plan to return from it. It's a lot there. I'm sorry if that's like overwhelming, but.
No, that's okay. I'll try to go piece by piece and be logical in all this. So we'll start how I don't think anything happened. This was something, I think it's just kind of like an overuse thing. There wasn't a movement. There wasn't a thing that happened where I was like, oh my God, I'm hurt. It was just kind of this slow build of like, okay, my leg's hurting a little bit more. It's hurting a little bit more. Okay, now like I'm crying through every session. We have a major issue here. And so what happened was about the end of July, my leg started hurting very badly. And I thought that it was just muscle tightness. I needed to get dry needled and it'd be fine. So I got dry needling done and it just like inflamed it times 10. Like it was so much worse. And I've gotten dry needled for years and I've never had that response. And then I was like, well, maybe they're just like, I hadn't gotten it done in a long time. So my husband was like, maybe they're just like so fucked up, you need to do it again, which like in retrospect is comical because that's not what I needed. But so I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so I went and got it done again and same thing, like 10 times worse, like so much pain. And then we were like, all right, well, I'll just keep trying to train through it. Cause I was still able to lift. I wasn't able to squat very much. And very much being, 130, which a lot of people would say that's a lot, but I was still able to clean and jerk. 90, 110, I could still snatch and clean and jerk 90, 110. So we were like, I can't be that hurt. There's just something weird going on here. But it was so persistent and I was looking forward to AO3 and I was like, well, and I wanted to make the world team. And I was like, so if I'm going to make the world team, I need to do at least 95, 115. And I'm in so much pain. I don't think that I can get past, I don't think I can push to new numbers right now. I could probably do the same. So I was like, all right, we're going to stop. I'm going to get this fixed and, whatever. I'm not going to go to worlds. And, I would have needed to do it after the fact. Now we know I would have needed to do a massive total to make the team. So I feel a little bit of peace about that. But so first we just went to a pain doctor because I was like, let's just make this go away. My husband thought it was a torn labrum, a hip labrum, because he has torn both of his and my symptoms were similar. So I went to see his pain doctor who was like a total douchebag, spent like 3 seconds talking to me. And he's like, yeah, sure. 2 cortisone shots, like one in, I believe it's called like my bursa sac, and then one in the hip joint. He was going to put it in via ultrasound. So this was going to be, super precise, right in the joint, like no way it couldn't work. Get it done and nothing changes. And I was like, I don't think it was my hip. Like, I don't think there's any way that this is a torn hip labrum. I get 2 cortisone shots and nothing changes. So I went to see an orthopedic surgeon and he was kind of just like a jerk, but he got me to get an MRI on my back. And I do have a bulging disc in my back. But I guess it's like very, very slight. And he was kind of like, I don't even know how you know about this. And I was like, well, I have been getting electrical pain in my back for years. and I've had back spasms, but never anything major. And so, we're like, okay, maybe I've been walking around with this for years, and now it's like just caused all this issue. And so, he gave me some he wouldn't give me any more cortisone because I just had it and I'd had 2 shots, and he thought that was too much. And he gave me some souped up ibuprofen, and he's like, this is super minor. Go to PT. You're going to be fine. The physical therapist thought I was ridiculous because you tell someone that you're in pain and there's a problem, but you can, put 250 pounds overhead, and they're like, I think you're fine. So she's like, yeah, just do some ab exercises and that's going to fix it because this is all caused by this bulging disc. And so that was 2 months ago. And I've been kind of just doing whatever, bodybuilding, just staying active. But I'm not convinced this is all caused by a back issue. Because the pain in my leg is it's not electrical in nature. It doesn't shoot down my leg. It stays very focused up in the top of my quad, kind of in the top of my IT band. So I don't know. At this stage, I squatted last night, 85 kilos, and it's irritated today. So I'm thinking I'm just going to go try to see someone else and see what they say, because I'm not buying that it's this disc thing in my back. And maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I have no real credentials to say that I don't believe it. It just doesn't feel like the right diagnosis based on the experience with my body over the last few years. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. So the obvious question would be how, as someone who's been weightlifting for such a long time and has dedicated so much time to it, how are you trying to cope with this, and how are you able to kind of cope with the absence of training and the absence of progress, and then just the sheer fact that you're kind of unable to figure out exactly what it is. And I think that's what's frustrating, is that you don't have a diagnosis and then you can't work towards anything because it's kind of just like an open-ended path at this point. So how are you trying to cope with that?
Well, at first I cried a lot. I was super pissed. But, at this point, I'm just trying to continue doing something. So I've been doing a lot of bodybuilding because I have some inequities in my upper body. And I'm compared to my legs, my upper body is super weak. So we've just been doing some of that. And then I've been taking Pilates, yoga, spin classes, just trying to fill my time. Because when you're not training, you find you have a lot of time and you don't need to sleep very much. And it's oh my God, the days are so long. So I've just been kind of doing what I can. This morning I went bench just to do something. And what we've been doing now, it's every 10 days, it's all right, well, I'll try some squats and see how they go. And if they don't go well, I'm all right, well, we'll give it another 10 days. Because the feedback I was given by the PT and the doctor was well, if it hurts, don't do it. Mm-hmm. And so the pain, if I don't train, the pain does go away. So, I never know if I'm ready to train or not until I try and it hurts, which is just the worst. It keeps you in this constant limbo of you're so scared to actually train and try because maybe you're going to wake up in the middle of the night in excruciating pain.
Yeah, I think it's always easier said than done, because I can talk about this and someone else can talk about this, and we can all say do whatever you can, just train, just bodybuild, whatever it is. But it's still so difficult to have that motivation to show up to the gym and do anything. I kind of chatted about this. I've been dealing with something similar, and I go to the gym to coach now, but I don't even feel like lifting. I'll do some bench press and some curls and pull-ups, but there's no drive there.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the fact that when you weightlift, you're kind of motivated by this end of reaching your potential, as abstract as it is, and kind of working towards that. Whereas, staying healthy is just kind of this weird concept I never even considered, because weightlifting is the opposite of health.
Yeah.
So, I guess the point I'm getting to is even though it sounds easy to say, when you're actually injured, it's difficult to put into practice just showing up and still training and still trying to get better. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how you feel about that.
With that, this is something I talk about in coaching nutrition clients kind of on a different vein, but the same idea. And in that, like, you have to rely on the commitments that you've made rather than how you feel, because how you feel is going to just fluctuate day to day. So, no, I did not feel like going to the gym today, and I was in a really bad attitude. Like, I had a bad attitude about it because I woke up in pain after squatting 85 kilos, but I have a program. Like, as stupid as I think the program is this week, like, I'm just going to do it, and I'm just going to do it. Like, cause you don't always feel like brushing your teeth, but you made a commitment to like keep your teeth in your head. So you're going to brush your teeth every morning. So like, that's the way I treat training. It's like, well, I don't want to do it, but I made this commitment, so I'm just going to follow through and go through the motions. And at the end of the day, like, I do value being active and being strong and being fit. So I am working towards a goal that I enjoy, even though it's not, snatches and clean and jerks and as exciting as I want it to be.
Yeah, and you don't want to be a hypocrite where you tell other people that you should train to stay healthy and lift weights and do some sort of cardio to stay healthy, and then you're like, well, I don't feel like doing it because it's not weightlifting.
Right.
And kind of a topic or something you mentioned earlier with filling your time, I don't think a lot of people realize, like, when you train, it satisfies a few different things. It satisfies your need for good nutrition, to put on muscle or to kind of maximize performance, and then it satisfies the need of getting enough sleep, and then minimizing stress, right? So it does all of these different things so that you're trying to optimize your time in whatever you do outside of the gym. And when you don't have that training stimulus, if we could just call it that, nutrition is like, I need to eat well, but just kind of eat whatever. And then sleeping, you don't need as much sleep because there's nothing really to recover from. So like, chop that down. And then, what do I do when I'm not in the gym? That's like another 2 to 3 hours. If you train twice a day, that's another 5 to 6 hours. And it's like weird having all of that availability. It's like very strange. Like, I don't like it personally.
Either. It's so weird. And I think like it has this compounding effect of like a lack of discipline spinning out of control in your life. And like that's very dramatic. My life is not spinning out of control. But like, I'm less disciplined on like when I'm going to go to bed, when I'm going to get up. Because it's like, well, it doesn't really matter. Like, I'm just going to go bullshit at the gym anyways. And I don't need to do that first thing in the morning. I can do it in the middle of the day. This week I am trying to get back into more of that, like my weightlifter schedule. But it's hard because it's not actually necessary. But, the days have gotten a lot longer. And you don't sleep as well either when you're not training hard. Like, if I'm training and I go to bed, like, I'm dead for 10 hours. And now it's like, I might wake up in the middle of the night, not be able to fall back asleep because I'm not that tired.
Yeah, it's like now you know what it's like to be a normal person.
I know. Why do people do it?
Right.
Why would you not train?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the greatest lessons are kind of learned through experience and going through something. So after this experience and kind of looking at it now, looking back on it and looking forward, to someone experiencing something similar, what would you say to them or to people that are training? Was there any way you think this could have been prevented? Do you think you could have done something differently? I mean, that's something hard to think back about. Hindsight is always 20/20, but. Yeah,
I truly think I've had a bulging disc for years. I've had electrical pain in my back for years. And that I feel like I don't know when I did it. So I have no way of knowing how to prevent it. I don't think that I trained irresponsibly. I don't see any way of, maybe never weightlifting. Maybe that would have kept this from happening. But short of that, I don't think this is an injury due to negligence or poor programming or anything like that. Perhaps it is, but I don't think so. I think a lot of these, like in weightlifting, it's really extreme. It's really hard on your body. I think like wear and tear injuries are just going to happen. Like in a way, your body's like a ticking time bomb and everything that you're putting it through, like something's going to give somewhere. Like I worked with a PT in Vegas and he had told me that I think he said 70% of athletes had torn labrums in their shoulders or their hips because it's like such an easy thing to do. And, you hear about it all the time, people tearing things like that. So I think part of it is just like the nature of the beast and trying to be a high level athlete.
Yeah. And I don't know if that, it kind of makes me feel more at ease. I don't know if anyone listening kind of feels that way, but like the fact that everyone goes through something like this, it helps me cope with the experiences that I've had, because it is par for the course, where most people, if they suffer an injury, they're like, why me? Why did this happen? My life is in shambles. But it happens to everybody. I mean, there are plenty of athletes that have been retired because of injuries. And I almost wonder if, like, when we talk about having such a long career in weightlifting, like you have 10 years to kind of reach your peak, if it is just a matter of injury or psychological burnout instead of just kind of losing that edge athletically.
Yeah, I think I read a book, I can't remember what it is, but he did frame a lack of injury as an advantage. Because you hear people love to talk about genetic advantages, but they never frame it in the way of like being not injured for 3 years is actually a major advantage that not every athlete gets. And some people are chronically injured. And then this is related, a little less related, but I'm reading the book right now called The Sports Gene. Have you read it?
No, I've heard of it though.
Oh, you need to read. This book is like, it's amazing. It's so just fascinating. And he talks a little bit about like genetic predisposition to injuries. And one of the things that he mentions is in soccer, actually, like they think that they want the fastest guys with the fast twitch muscle fibers, but those are the guys who get injured first because they're faster than everyone else. They're able to like out-train everyone else. And it's actually like the slow twitch muscle fiber guys who end up making it to the pros because they're less injury prone. So I'm sure buried in here somewhere is there's some kind of like we all have predispositions to some kind of injuries because of like, the angle on my forearm, like how long is my forearm, or like, are my shoulders oriented in such a way, or like, whatever. Like, I'm sure there's some anatomy or like physiological issue that made me predisposed to issues with my back, or, my husband with his hips or whatever.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's a symptom too of coming into the sport later and not having like this foundation of relatively perfect movement, right? I talked to Aaron Horschig of Squat University, kind of framed it as if you have a Corvette that is perfectly put together and well-maintained, it can run for 100,000 miles. If you have one that its oil hasn't been changed and it has like issues with the axle, I'm not a car guy, so I don't know what else to say, but it'll maybe run for 50,000, right? So if you can prepare in childhood with a bunch of general physical preparedness work and then perfect movement, right, you're just going to last longer. It's kind of the nature of the beast. So we come into this and we can't overhead squat correctly, we can't squat correctly, we can't really do the movements well because we rely on so much strength. That transitional period is kind of accruing all of this stress. And if we think of stress as something that's cumulative, I mean, it makes sense that in 3 years it's kind of like a ticking time bomb. So it's kind of like the downside of coming into weightlifting at a later age, but I guess you get the amount of time that you get to enjoy it. Obviously recognizing this isn't the last time, but it kind of makes you appreciate what time you do have and realize that those PRs do end eventually, I guess, which is kind of like a pretty dark place to go with that.
Yeah. I've never thought about it in relation to age, because everyone I've talked to has always spun my age in the sport as like a positive, as like my sports age is so much lower than most people's because I wasn't an athlete prior to being a weightlifter. So who knows, like what's better. But I do think imbalances certainly do, not changing the oil or whatever, that like does certainly lead to injuries. And you see that with people, like people who have injuries seem to like be more prone to injuries generally. And I think that is like a cumulative thing of like things are breaking down in different spots, and therefore like other things are getting overworked and then breaking as well. And that's possible too. Like I had sprained my ankle in December, and that was my right ankle, and then my left leg is hurting. So it's totally possible that it's somehow related back to that, and that I was doing something really uneven, and then this left disc is bulging because of that. Who knows?
So heading forward, when you get back to training, is there anything you're going to do differently, or are you going to kind of just resume where you were before everything happened?
I mean, the feedback I'm getting is that my core is weak, and I've heard that before. So I'm going to add more ab exercises. I mostly just hate them. I hate anything that I have to do like for a long time or a bunch of times to like get the return. Like I want to do something once really hard, and that's it. And so I like have never really trained abs at all. So I'm going to make myself do that. That's the big thing. That's supposedly that's like, you know, the magic sauce. But other than that, I don't think so. I don't think I don't think I was doing anything significantly wrong.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I've kind of been steering towards the ab movements lately, and programming them in for a bunch of people, because as weightlifters, you're right, we are minimalists in that we like to snatch, clean and jerk with very low reps, very high intensity. Same with squats, and kind of minimize whatever accessories we have, but. The approach I've been taking is changing, trying to do more bodybuilding work, unilateral work, carries, because it's all about, like we said before, just elongating that time that we have to peak, and just keeping people resilient and able to handle the training. Because a lot of the training, like, you can become good at training plenty of different ways. At the end of the day, it's like snatching, clean and jerking, and squatting. But to deal with that, I think a lot of people are missing out on what can allow them to do that longer, which is, like you mentioned, the kind of prehab work, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes sense. Just not the message anyone wants to hear.
No one. No, that's like telling people to eat more vegetables. Like earlier, yes. You're like, oh, eat fruits, vegetables, lean proteins. No one wants to do that. I don't want to do that, but I do it anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's like the sign of a good athlete, is someone that can delay kind of that gratification and kind of suck it up now for a reward later on down the line, which is training, right? You delay all of the gratification you're going to receive until you hit that one PR, and then it's back to the drawing board.
Yeah, for sure.
And kind of before we finish up, do you have any last words for the people listening now?
Not really. I just wish I was doing something much more interesting to share with everyone besides squatting 85 kilos. But yeah.
Yeah, no. I don't know. I feel like it's pretty relatable, though. I feel like a lot of people go through this, and you know, some people have had it to the point of where it's kind of retired them, and that's got to be tough to deal with. So you kind of mentioned it before, like you're doing Pilates and yoga and stuff. So is that kind of your way of filling the time now? Do you have any like other aspirations you have to trying new things out?
No, I'm just I'm doing it because like Pilates is kind of hard on your core, and I was like, well, I can do a class and then I don't have to do a bunch of sit-ups. And so like that's like my agenda, and it's just like something to it makes me do it. It makes me stay active, and it's surprisingly difficult for someone who's strong. Like I would think that these classes would be a joke, but I'm kind of like pouring sweat and struggling. So it gives me a reward of feeling like I'm doing something difficult. Yeah. So no, that's really just like not wanting to bodybuild 7 days a week and like just moving. And spin is like I'm desperately searching for something like intense to do. But it seems like anything that I do that's really intense causes my back to get upset and hurts my legs. So spin is the only thing I've been able to do that I can kind of do it in intensity and it doesn't cause any pain, or at least like not that kind of pain. Like pain is normal.
Yeah, so. That's really interesting. So, and the reason I brought you on again, one is to share your experiences and to talk about what you're going through and kind of all of that good stuff. But we got great feedback from the last podcast. I mean, everyone that listened to it loved you and kind of loved what you had to say. I mean, I don't know if they loved you as a person, but they loved your general philosophy. So I think it's awesome having you on, and I really appreciate your time. So kind of wrapping up, where can people find you if they want to contact you and chat with you, or sign up for some nutrition coaching or whatever other services you have to offer?
Sure. Yeah. The best place is Instagram, and I'm Mrs. Buff Mendes with an S on Instagram. My Instagram's not very active right now, unfortunately. But, and then if you're interested in working against gravity, you can just go to workingagainstgravity.com. we work with tons of CrossFit, weightlifting athletes, powerlifters. So that's a great resource. Our coaches are awesome.
Yeah, and just kind of like talking to my buddy before, he actually listened to the podcast with you on, and he signed up for your nutrition coaching, and I thought that was really cool that we could kind of connect other people. So guys, don't hesitate to reach out if you think you like what Taylor is talking about, her approach to nutrition for strength athletes, then be sure to give her a shout. But for us, that's another episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. If you liked it, like, share, and subscribe. Leave a review. 5 stars, 1 star. Tell me you hate me. Tell me you love me. It's all appreciated. And until next time, peace.